He stood in the doorway like a ghost from a past I thought I'd buried. 15 years ago, that boy was left to die on my porch, frail, silent, barely breathing. Now, he stood tall, alive and unrecognizable, his eyes burning holes through the two people who had abandoned him. My sister Linda's laughter stopped mid-sentence. The glass of wine in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Mark, the man who once called me his wife, could barely move. They had come to mock me, to gloat about the life they stole, to remind me of the husband and peace they took away. But what they didn't know was that the very child they left behind would become the one thing they could never escape. 15 years ago, Linda ran off with Mark and vanished without a word. But before leaving, she dropped off her sick little boy, Noah, on my doorstep, claiming he had weeks to live. Her exact words still echo in my head. "You've always been the caring one, Grace. You'll know what to do." Then she smiled and drove away. That was the last time I saw her, until today. While they lived their perfect life somewhere far away, I was the one fighting for Noah's life through hospital nights, endless bills, and silent prayers that no one heard but me. They thought I'd break. They thought he'd die quietly, forgotten. But he didn't. He lived. He grew stronger, kinder, smarter. And when that front door opened 15 years later and Noah walked in, it wasn't just a reunion. It was Judgment Day. I watched their faces crumble, their pride, their confidence, their lies, all in a single breath. They had left him to die, and now the living proof of their betrayal stood before them. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you believe that karma always finds its way back, then don't just scroll past, hit that subscribe button now. Because the stories we tell here remind us of one simple truth. No matter how far someone runs, the past always catches up. And if you don't subscribe, well, you might end up in the comments later wishing you had. We were sisters once, inseparable, like two halves of the same heart. Linda and I grew up sharing everything, our secrets, our clothes, even our dreams. She was the wild one, always chasing something new, while I was the grounded one, content with simple joys, Sunday dinners, laughter in the kitchen, and the man I loved, Mark. When I married him, Linda stood beside me, tears of joy in her eyes. Or at least, I thought they were tears of joy. I never noticed the way she watched him when he wasn't looking, the way her laughter lingered a second too long when he spoke. Back then, I believed love could blind jealousy. I was wrong. It began subtly, innocently even. She'd offer to help when I was tired, spending more and more time at our house. "You deserve a break, Grace," she'd say, smiling warmly. I thought it was kindness, but kindness doesn't whisper behind closed doors. Kindness doesn't turn comfort into confession. They started talking late into the night, first about trivial things, then about deeper ones. I'd walk into the living room to find them sitting close, their voices low, their eyes flickering with something I couldn't name at the time. I told myself it was nothing. I trusted them both. But trust is a fragile thing. It only breaks once, and when it does, it cuts deeper than betrayal itself. The day everything fell apart started like any other. The morning sun spilled through the curtains. The smell of coffee filled the air, and the house was quiet, too quiet. Mark's car was gone. Linda's room was empty. The drawers in the hallway were half open, clothes missing, and there was a stillness in the air that didn't belong. My heart pounded as I called out their names, hoping to hear laughter, an answer, anything, but there was only silence. Then, I saw a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter, resting beside my wedding ring. I knew, before I even opened it, that my world had ended. The note was short, cruel, and written in Linda's familiar looping hand. "He was never yours to keep. And this boy, well, he won't last long anyway." My vision blurred as I stumbled toward Noah's nursery. The door creaked open, and there he was, tiny, pale, fragile, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. He looked so peaceful, so unaware of the storm his mother had left behind. I knelt beside the crib, my hands trembling as I touched his little fingers. They were cold, too cold. I sank to the floor and wept until my body ached, until there were no tears left to give. In that moment, I understood what Linda had done wasn't just betrayal, it was abandonment in its cruelest form. She hadn't only taken my husband, She'd left me her dying child as a reminder of what she thought I could never have. A family. The pain was sharp, raw, unbearable. But as I watched Noah breathe, weak yet steady, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let him go. I wasn't going to let her win. That night, I sat by his crib, the moonlight casting a silver glow across his face, and I made a promise. I whispered it over and over until it became a prayer. If I have to choose between saving this child or saving myself, I'll choose him. I didn't know then how much that vow would cost me or how deeply it would change us both. But I meant every word. The days that followed were a blur of fear and exhaustion. Noah's breathing grew weaker, his skin pale as snow, his tiny frame trembling beneath layers of blankets that could never seem to keep him warm. The doctor's words echoed in my mind again and again. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but there's little we can do. His heart is weak. You should prepare yourself." But how does a person prepare to lose a child, especially one that isn't even yours, but somehow feels like he's always belonged to you? Every time I looked at him, I saw pieces of both cruelty and innocence, the betrayal of his mother and the blamelessness of a child who didn't ask to be born into this kind of pain. I refused to let his story end like that. I sold my wedding ring the next morning. The ring that once symbolized love now funded the hope of keeping a child alive. I remember standing outside the pawn shop, clutching the small envelope of cash as though it were oxygen. I didn't cry then. There was no room left in me for tears, only determination. The hospital became our second home. Days turned into nights, and nights bled into mornings. Machines beeped softly in the background, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling the air, nurses coming and going. I sat beside his bed every night, reading him stories even when he was too weak to open his eyes. I sang softly, the same lullabies my mother used to sing to us when we were children, the same songs Linda once hummed along to. Sometimes I prayed, not because I was certain anyone was listening, but because hope was the only thing keeping my hands from trembling. There were moments when I thought it was over, when his breathing would slow and I'd hold mine too, afraid that if I exhaled, he might not inhale again. I remember one night in particular, the storm outside was fierce. Thunder rolling across the sky, lightning flashing through the hospital window. I gripped Noah's little hand and whispered, "You're not leaving me, sweetheart. Not like this." And for the first time, his fingers moved. It was faint, barely a twitch, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that he was still fighting, that somewhere deep inside that fragile body was a will stronger than pain itself. The weeks that followed were a quiet miracle. His breathing steadied. His color returned. The doctors called it a medical anomaly. I called it grace. The day he smiled for the first time, I broke down completely. It wasn't just a smile, it was a declaration, a small spark of defiance against the darkness that tried to take him. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're not dying, sweetheart. You're living, and I'll make sure of it." I started keeping a journal then, writing down every small victory, every smile, every heartbeat, every ounce of weight he gained. They were small things, but to us, they were everything. He began to laugh, weak but joyful, and his laughter filled that cold hospital room like sunlight breaking through clouds. I learned to live on very little, skipped meals, sold old clothes, took odd jobs, anything to keep his treatment going. People whispered that I was wasting my life, that the boy wouldn't last. But they didn't understand. When you've held someone who was expected to die and watched them come back to life, you stop caring about what people think. You just keep fighting, and that's what I did, every single day. I thought our pain was behind us. That after everything, maybe fate had finally decided to show mercy. But somewhere out there, Linda and Mark were building a life they'd soon regret. Years passed quietly, though the ache of betrayal never truly left. Noah grew stronger, his laughter filling the small house that once echoed with silence. I watched him learn to walk, to run, to live without fear, and every milestone felt like a small miracle I had no right to, but cherished all the same. We didn't have much hand-me-down clothes, second-hand toys, meals stretched thin, but we had peace, and peace was something I hadn't known in a long time. Then one afternoon, everything changed again. I was at the grocery store when I overheard two women talking near the magazine rack. Their voices were casual, but the names they mentioned froze me in place. Linda and Mark? Oh yes, they're thriving out west. Realtors now. Just bought a new house, huge place. They were even featured in Homes and Living. My breath caught. I turned slowly, pretending to look through the magazines, and there it was, a glossy page showing them smiling, perfectly dressed, standing in front of a mansion with the caption, "The Thompsons. Building dreams, building empires." My hands trembled. The woman in the photo barely resembled my sister, her hair perfectly styled, her hand resting on Mark's shoulder, that same confident grin I used to know. He looked proud, powerful, like a man who'd never known guilt. The article spoke of their shared passion, their devotion to family values, their rise from humble beginnings. I couldn't finish reading it. My eyes blurred before I reached the end. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Noah had gone to bed. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock. I stared at that picture again, anger and sorrow twisting inside me. They had built an entire life from the ashes they left behind. I wanted to hate them, to scream, to burn that magazine, to curse their names, but I didn't. Instead, I folded it neatly, placed it in a drawer, and whispered, "Let them. I don't need their world. I have mine." And I meant it. Every day I woke up and saw Noah's smile. I was reminded that what they abandoned had become something priceless. Love, real love, the kind that doesn't fade when life gets hard. People in town began to talk, of course. Small towns always do. One Sunday after church, I was shaking hands with the pastor when I heard someone behind me whisper, "Can you imagine? Her sister's living like a queen while Grace raises that sick child." My heart sank, but I didn't turn around. I smiled politely and said softly, "Let them talk. I'm raising a miracle." I learned to hold my head high after that, not because I wasn't hurting, but because dignity was the only thing I still had control over. Every time someone reminded me of what I'd lost, I reminded myself of what I'd gained: purpose. That little boy, once left to die, was alive, laughing, learning, and every heartbeat of his was proof that love triumphs over cruelty. Stories like this remind us that some people will leave you when you have nothing, but love never leaves. If you've ever had to start over after someone broke your trust, take a second to give this video a like, because your strength deserves to be seen. Life carried on quietly for a while after that. The days grew longer, softer, but destiny has its own timing, and when it came back around, it brought everything full circle. 15 years had passed since that magazine cover, 15 long, quiet years that reshaped every piece of who I was. The world had changed, and so had I. Noah was no longer the fragile boy doctors once said wouldn't live to see 6. He was 20 now, tall, confident, with eyes full of purpose and a heart too big for the world. He had just started studying medicine, determined to save lives the way his was once saved. Every time I looked at him, I felt something sacred, a mixture of pride, relief, and awe. Our home was small, but filled with laughter, the scent of coffee in the mornings, and the soft hum of his studying late into the night. I thought peace had finally found us for good. Until that day, the day the phone rang. It was an ordinary afternoon. The sun poured gently through the lace curtains, and I was folding laundry when I heard the sound, sharp, insistent. The phone on the counter vibrated again, rattling slightly against the wood. Something about that ring felt different, heavy, like it carried ghosts. I wiped my hands, picked it up, and answered softly, "Hello?" The voice on the other end hesitated, a familiar tone wrapped in nerves. "Grace? It's Carol, your cousin." I smiled faintly. "Carol? It's been ages. How are you?" But her voice didn't carry warmth, just unease. "Grace, I don't know how to say this, but Linda and Mark are back in town." My heart stilled. The sound of the ticking clock filled the silence between us. Carol continued, her words tumbling quickly now. "They've been at the country club, hosting dinners, showing off their new cars. They're telling everyone how lucky they are, how successful. And," she hesitated, then sighed, "they said you wasted your life." The words landed like stones in my chest. For a moment, I didn't move, didn't speak. I just stood there, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of birds outside, filling the room where my world had suddenly tilted again. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, too calm. "They can keep their luck," I said quietly. "I have love." Carol exhaled on the other end, as if she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "I knew you'd say something like that," she whispered. I smiled faintly. "Then you still know me." After I hung up, I sat for a while, the phone still warm in my palm. Memories crept in like unwelcome shadows. Linda's laughter as she packed her suitcase, Mark's cold stare, the sound of the door closing behind them. But the woman sitting at that kitchen table wasn't the same one they'd left behind. 15 years of raising a child on my own had built a different kind of strength, quiet, unshakable, and rooted in love. I looked around my little home. Noah's textbooks stacked on the counter, his stethoscope lying by the sink, the framed photo of us by the window. Every piece of it was built from survival, from faith, and so I straightened my back, took a deep breath, and whispered to the empty room, "If they're back, then let them come. I'm ready now." Because when they came knocking, I wasn't the same woman they left behind. The week after that phone call, the air felt different, charged, like the moment before a storm. Word spread fast in our small town. Linda and Mark were hosting a family reunion. I received an invitation in the mail, elegant, gold embossed, with their names written in bold, expensive lettering. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the edges. 15 years of silence, and now they wanted to play family? I could almost hear Linda's laughter between the lines, the same laughter that once echoed through my home before she tore it apart. Noah saw the envelope on the counter that evening. "Are you going?" he asked, his tone calm but watchful. He had his father's sharp jawline, but his eyes were mine, kind, knowing, and steady. I shrugged, pretending to be indifferent. "Maybe. Sometimes silence isn't strength. Sometimes showing up is." He nodded slowly, understanding more than I said aloud. "If you go, don't let them see they ever broke you." I smiled faintly. "They won't." The day of the gathering, I dressed simply a navy blue dress, silver earrings, and the quiet confidence of a woman who had rebuilt her life from ashes. When I arrived, their mansion was already full polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the smell of expensive perfume and self-importance filling the air. The moment I stepped in, heads turned, conversations paused, whispers rippled like wind through dry leaves. And then her voice, "Grace." I turned. Linda stood at the top of the staircase, radiant in designer clothes, her hair perfectly styled, a glass of champagne in hand. Mark stood beside her, smiling that same rehearsed smile. I remembered the one that never reached his eyes. She descended slowly, each step dripping with confidence and cruelty. "Grace," she said again, her lips curving into a smirk. "You look older. Guess hard work does that to you." A few people nearby chuckled softly, unsure whether to laugh or look away. I met her gaze and smiled, steady and unbothered. "It builds character," I said gently. Her smirk faltered for just a second before she recovered, tilting her head. "And what about that poor little boy you raised?" she asked, swirling her drink. "He must be gone by now, right?" The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled slow and calm. "You'll see him soon," I replied. Something in my tone made her pause. Mark's eyes flickered with unease. The laughter that followed was thinner now, nervous. Linda forced another smile. "Well," she said, "we're just so glad you came. It's good to see you. After everything." I nodded politely. "Yes," I said softly. "After everything." The air between us grew tight, thick with unspoken truths. Around us, relatives chatted, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing at the center of the room. As Linda turned to greet another guest, she leaned close enough for only me to hear. "You should have stayed gone, Grace. You don't belong here anymore." I looked at her, really looked at her. The perfect skin, the diamonds, the hollow behind her eyes. "Oh, Linda," I whispered, "you're right. I don't belong here anymore. I've outgrown this kind of emptiness." She blinked, caught off guard by the calm in my voice. I walked past her, my heels steady against the marble, and took a seat near the back of the room, facing the grand entrance. Because I knew what was coming. They thought I was alone in that room. They had no idea who was about to walk through that door. The chatter in the hall swelled around me like distant thunder, soft, meaningless noise. Glasses clinked, laughter rippled, and yet beneath all of it, there was a tension only I could feel. My heart was calm, though. The kind of calm that comes after years of storms. I knew the moment was close. I could almost sense it, the quiet shift in the air before everything changes. Then it happened. The grand doors at the far end of the hall creaked open slowly, and all sound seemed to vanish. Heads turned one by one. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Even the string quartet in the corner faltered into silence. There he was, Noah, tall, composed, wearing his crisp white doctor's coat that gleamed under the golden lights. His presence filled the room, not just because of who he was, but because of everything he represented. Life, survival, defiance. He walked in with quiet confidence, scanning the faces before him, faces that once pitied him, or worse, dismissed him as a child destined not to make it. The hush deepened. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the room itself. When his eyes found mine, a soft smile spread across his face. He crossed the room without hesitation and pulled me into his arms, holding me as though nothing else in the world mattered. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, warm, and proud. "I'm home." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. I could see Linda freeze near the buffet table, her champagne glass trembling slightly before it slipped from her hand and shattered across the marble floor. The sound echoed, sharp and final, like the cracking of something deeper, her composure, her illusion, her lie. Mark's jaw clenched. He looked between Noah and me, his face pale, eyes darting, searching for something to say, but there was nothing left to say. His secrets were standing in front of him, alive and undeniable. Noah turned toward them slowly. His voice was calm, polite even, but every word carried the weight of 15 silent years. "You must be the people who gave me away," he said. A murmur moved through the guests. "Thank you," he added, with a small, gracious smile that mirrored mine. "Because without you, I wouldn't have found the best mother in the world." A few guests clapped softly, unsure whether it was appropriate. Others whispered, eyes wide, stunned by the sheer gravity of what they were witnessing. Linda's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The room seemed to tilt around her. All those years she spent flaunting her wealth, her husband, her success, and now, standing before her, was the child she had cast aside. No longer weak, no longer dying, but thriving. Everything she abandoned had come back not for vengeance, but for truth. I could feel the shift in the room. The pity once directed at me had turned. Now, every gaze lingered on her. Every whisper cut deeper than any blade. Noah stepped closer, his eyes kind but unflinching. "You called me a burden once," he said softly. "But she called me her son, and that's why I'm here today alive." Silence, heavy, absolute. Even the air felt thick with reckoning. Linda tried to smile, her voice breaking. We did what we had to do. You don't understand." But no one was listening anymore. The truth stood between us all, brighter and more powerful than any defense she could offer. I looked at her then, not with anger, but with a quiet pity that only time can bring. "Some debts," I said gently, "are paid not in money or apologies, but in moments like this." Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, I saw something real in them, not cruelty, not arrogance, but regret. Noah took my hand and squeezed it lightly. Around us, people began to whisper again, though softer this time, words like unbelievable, poetic, justice. And as I stood there beside him, my heart steady, my voice calm, I knew that life had finally come full circle. But as powerful as that moment was, I could feel it deep in my bones. Karma wasn't done. There was still one truth left to reveal. The silence that followed Noah's words felt endless. Then, slowly, like sunlight breaking through a heavy storm, soft applause began to echo through the room. It started with one person, then another, until the entire hall erupted into clapping. The noise swelled, warm and alive, washing over us both. Cameras flashed, phones were raised, and in that moment, all those years of quiet suffering became something radiant and undeniable. Noah turned to face the crowd, his posture tall, his expression resolute. He waited for the room to settle before speaking again. His voice carried a steadiness that could only come from truth. "When everyone gave up on me," he began, "Grace didn't. She fought for me when no one else would. She prayed when the doctors stopped believing. She worked when there was nothing left to sell. She's why I'm alive today." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as Noah's eyes softened, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. "And because of her, I'm dedicating my life to giving others the same chance she gave me. Next month, I'm opening a free community clinic in her name. The Grace Miller Foundation will help children from families who can't afford treatment, just like I once was." Applause thundered across the room, not polite, but heartfelt. Some people stood, cheering. Others wiped away tears. For a moment, even I couldn't breathe. The years of pain, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, all of it, had led to this single, shining moment of grace and vindication. Across the room, I saw Mark lower his head. His confident posture had collapsed into something small, ashamed. Without a word, he turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing against the marble as if marking the end of a long, hollow chapter. Linda remained frozen in place. Her hands trembled around the stem of her glass. The diamonds on her wrist no longer looked like trophies. They looked like chains. Her eyes darted from Noah to me, searching for a trace of recognition, of forgiveness, of something she could still claim. After the crowd began to disperse, she approached him slowly. Her voice, once dripping with pride, now came out in a fragile whisper. "Noah," she said, "I'm still your mother." He turned to her calmly, his tone steady, but his eyes unwavering. "No," he said quietly, "you're the woman who left me. She's my mother." Her lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. The truth hung between them, heavy, final, and painfully deserved. The years of lies, of vanity, of self-preservation had all led her to this being seen for who she truly was. Noah placed his arm around my shoulders, guiding me toward the door as the room behind us filled with quiet, uneasy whispers. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies. The truth had done what vengeance never could. It had restored what was lost. As we stepped outside into the cool night air, I glanced back once more at the house filled with ghosts. Then I turned away, the weight lifting from my chest, replaced by peace. And to everyone still listening, to every woman who's been left behind, doubted, or replaced, remember this. The world forgets good women far too easily while praising those who hurt them. But you, the one still standing, still surviving your story, matters. If you're still here, still standing, take a moment to subscribe right now. Your strength deserves to be honored, not ignored. There's a stillness that comes after the storm, not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels earned. The years of struggle, heartbreak, and endurance had led me to this quiet peace. As the sun sank behind the horizon, painting the sky in soft gold and lavender, Noah and I walked side by side down the path that led to the clinic. The sign gleamed proudly in the evening light, the Grace Miller Foundation. For the first time in what felt like forever, my heart didn't ache. It felt whole. I spoke softly, mostly to myself, but also to every woman who'd ever been broken and forced to start again. Some betrayals shatter you, I said, but sometimes they shape you into someone stronger. I paused, watching Noah wave to a small group of children playing nearby. Their laughter carried in the air a sound I once thought I'd never hear in my home again. "Linda took my husband," I continued, "and she left her dying son on my doorstep. She thought she was ruining me. But in trying to destroy me, she gave me my greatest purpose." Noah turned, smiling at me the way only a son can. His eyes carried both gratitude and quiet pride. "You gave me life," he said. "Now it's my turn to give it back to others." I nodded, tears stinging the corners of my eyes, but they were tears of peace, not pain. "You already have," I whispered. As the clinic doors opened for the first time, nurses in clean uniforms moved through the halls. The waiting room filled with families who had nowhere else to go. Mothers clutching weak children, fathers trying to hold back tears. Each face reminded me of the nights I had prayed beside Noah's hospital bed, the times I'd sold what little I had just to buy hope. And now, here I was, standing in a place built from the very thing that once broke me. I looked up at the sign again and felt the weight of every choice that had led here. Because sometimes, I said quietly, the people who walk away from you are the ones who lose everything in the end. Linda had her money, her house, her vanity, but she had no peace, no legacy, no love. I had all three. The sunset reflected in the clinic windows, glowing like a promise kept. I took Noah's hand and felt the warmth of everything we had fought for. The pain was over, the wounds had healed, and in their place was purpose, the kind that outlives betrayal. And to everyone listening, to every heart that stayed till the end of this story, if this touched your soul, if it reminded you that love and resilience always win in the end, then let it move you. Give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who believes in karma, and make sure to subscribe because there are more true stories of betrayal, secrets, and silent revenge coming soon.